Hiya Godzilla figures go quick, so make sure you get your pre-orders in at Big Bad Toy Store at the link in the description. Better be safe than sorry.
Kaiju, turtles, Dragon Ball, and more. It's Steven's Toy Reviews.
Hey there, collectors. It's going to be Steven here, and welcome to another Hiya Godzilla review, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Exquisite Basic Flameborn Rodan. I think that's the proper title. It's going to be the Rodan where you go and you turn on the UV light and Rodan glows. And he's all cool. He's like a flaming chicken, right? Cool. Yes, so Flameborn Rodan is here as an opportunity for folks who may have missed the reissue or the original release of Rodan, and as a neat rave version of Rodan with some light up effects underneath a UV light. So, are there gonna be unique changes for folks to double dip? Is the UV light effect really cool? And is it worth getting and paying and buying another Rodan when you already have one? Or should I just stop talking and show you whether or not it's worth adding into your collection? That one! That's why you're here. Aha! Tricked you. We're actually going to do this review a bit differently because this is a different kind of figure. And we're going to have to go over some of the gimmicks. So first and foremost, articulation, and pretty much everything is going to be the same. This is going to take the translucent heat ray, blueberry, Jolly Rancher, Godzilla approach, and they used some softer plastic here for the figure. So it is a bit easier to move. But when I say that it's a bit easier to move, it's also a bit easier to have stuff fall off. But that's okay, just because you can do that. Go boop, and you can push the hinge jaw back on. So now I'm glad that we have that. We have the neck, which is, interestingly, I'll show you, a ball joint that plugs into the neck, then an oddly cupped ball joint that is angled, and then that has a ball joint for the head, so this way we can push it in all sorts of different directions and get Rodan to look around. Again, I will show you in a second what I'm talking about here. Now, for the wings. As you can see where they attach in on the base, there's a ball joint there, right? And you can actually get a good glimpse of it here, so I guess we'll take a quick peek. That base color is going to be a cloudy color, like a cloudy white, not quite translucent, but it's close. So yeah, the articulation scheme is going to be the same. And we can get nice movement here for the wing. We can spin it all the way around if we really need to. There's not going to be like a spot you can slot the wing into to sort of close that gap there, if you will. It's not a McGap meme, but but still, Rodan's wings look good. Now, just because... Wow! Ooh, yeah. So the bendy wire in the wing, be gentle with it. There is a chance of breakage, as all bendy wire may have. I obviously went ham here because apparently I just love that section in my original Hiya Rodan review, which I admit you should take a look at the beginning of it. Sometimes you'll have bendy wire that breaks, sometimes you won't. You just have to be careful with it. I've had Revoltech Kaiju figures where pretty much right after I opened them up, the bendy wire was not intact. Where others, they're still intact now, but some only have the small segments where they've been broken off that like to move, and others, even though that they are intact, they don't like to move. Some have Trendmaster figures from the 90s that are still intact, and they're bendy figs. So there you go. Wings, they're fine. You can get them into a curl pose. It's all good. We have a bit of an ab crunch here, so Rodan can twist and turn and rock back and forth and all that good stuff. Yeehaw. Actually, just to show you, you can have Rodan do that if you want. That's neat. Hips. Ball joint. So you can kick that far forward and back, and you can use the rotation of the ball joint to actually get Rodan to do the splits. Why you need Rodan to do the splits, I don't know, but you can do that. Go ahead and correct me in the comments, because I already know I'm going to mess this up. Like the knee, if you will, has a I think it's just going to be a hinge and a swivel. So you can get that. And then you got like the ankle, which is a hinge and a swivel. No ankle rockers, just a hinge and swivel. And then the tail is going to be just a ball joint. So the articulation for Rodan is just fine, you know. But you may notice that, like, for your neck, for your Rodan, if you do get one, you may notice, like, oh, hey, the range of movement is different than my original. The range of movement is different than blah, blah. Here's the reason why. We're professional, so we already had our original Rodan ready to go and not off to the side. So I'm going to do this just because it's easier for me to do with this Rodan, because the joints are a bit softer on the Flameborn Rodan, right? So, oh, yeah, here's the side-by-side comparison. Anyway, we'll see that at the end. So I noted, at least I recall, in my original review for Rodan, that the neck had some limited movement in one particular direction, and I actually just talked about the neck articulation for Rodan. This is interesting. Let's go ahead and do a quick zoom in. So this neck joint is not changed on the new Rodan here. So the way that it works is it's going to be a small ball joint in the actual body cavity of Rodan right here at the shoulders for the neck. And then take a look at that angled ball joint. So that socket there is actually at an angle, and that is where your neck joint is going to plug in right there. And then you have a ball joint here, so that's going to be a barbell style. So that determines how much of an angle Rodan will have depending on how it's posed. And it can be kind of a pain to get that joint turned around. So let me just go ahead and get this, hopefully, popped back in here on camera so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. So you can get some good movement down like that. You can get some good movement up. But you do have to have that turned in order to get better movement one way or another. So if you have the cup pointing up, if you will, or the socket, you're not going to get Rodan to look down very far. But if you have it pointing up, well then, of course, all you have to do is just move the sheath, if you will, pieces around, and you're going to get Rodan to look up just fine, along with looking left and right. So if you do have this issue where you're like, man, I cannot get my Rodan to look as far down as Steven's, that's a real pain. I wonder if something's wrong. The socket, the cup, it's pointed up because that's what my original Rodan was doing. Long explanation, but it is a big help. And then also, I kind of showed you a bit, but you can see it a bit better here. And you can also see what I'm talking about here for the cup, for the socket. Zoom in. Again, it's not translucent plastic, but it is a bit of a cloudy, opaque plastic for the joints. You can see that the socket, the cup, is pointed down instead of up. So something to keep in mind. The articulation for Rodan is just fine, especially considering they're using that somewhat softer plastic for this one, like they did with the translucent Heat Ray Godzilla, and that just made everything easier to move right out of the box. So Rodan here, other Rodan, thank you for your service. We are going to retire you right now. You're going to go in the garbage can until I need you for the side-by-side comparison. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and talk about accessories, because this is where things get interesting, if you will. And now I'm throwing stuff around off camera. So first and foremost, we do get the Hiya support stand. I've got it in a very, very small way right now because I was using it for pictures. And it's basically the same stand that we got before, but there are a couple of changes you eagle-eyed or Rodan-eyed viewers can already notice. So what they did, there are still going to be 3 total parts that you can, maneuver and make your stand bigger or smaller. So that's retained. What's changed here, though, is they put screws in. They're Phillips head screws, okay? So you can tighten and you can loosen all of the points on the figure. I'm sorry, the stand. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. But unfortunately, the actual structure of the stand was only a part of what didn't really make it work for Rodan, because it's kind of awkward, because you can put Rodan in the stand, right? And that kind of works, but okay, that's kind of cool. You can get Rodan to fly. We'll get him in a flight pose real quick, because I don't really need to cover a stand too much, except for one fun part. Okay, there's that. So that works. Okay, that's fine. I would have liked a more appropriate cradle. But what I will say is, for this part and these, I was able to tighten. But there's a missing Phillips head right here. So unfortunately for a proper screwdriver, I didn't have. I only had the, let me be clear here, follow along, the tips for a drill that I routinely use for all of my other like support stands. And regardless of how much I tried to tighten some of the spots, they would not tighten. So it was basically fruitless. Like the threads were stripped for these stands, and the bottom one, the top of the screw head just ripped off. So yeah, all right. So I guess we'll come on right back over to Rodan here. So the support stand, they are making changes. Buy a pack of Tamashi stages. Now, here's what you're here for, right? Okay, where did I put them? We're doing this professionally here, kids. I am a trained professional. Woo! UV light. Woo! Can you see? No, of course you can't. So let's take a quick break. Aha! See, that's what you're here for. It is going to be the UV effect on Rodan. Take a look at all of that coolness. So, yeah, I've got one light stationary, one light, I'm moving around. We're seeing everything on the figure here, and, I don't know. Like, it's pretty neat, but, it's just really only on the tips of Rodan here. And I know that's, like, what the point is. Like, it's only supposed to be around the edges of Rodan's wings, maybe his tail tip and so forth. But it's not that strong, and it only just seems to be a little bit. Of course, here's the reason why I did things a bit different. We're going to go into the sculpt and paint section right after this with a 360 spin view right now, so you can get a good idea of what Rodan looks like when we have him up on the table for his usual spin, right? Okay, so yeah, the UV light, it just seems a bit weak. I don't really think that this is a huge super duper effect that is going to be one that many folks are going to want to dish out the money for, so to speak. Because, again, taking a look at the figure in hand with the UV effect, it's very meh. It's very cool to see Rodan underneath these lights, and the effect really is stunning, but when it comes down to that awesome flame fiery effect compared to what we kind of saw on the prototype, where it did look a bit luscious. It looked like it was really interwoven with the crags on the wings and all of the fun goodness that Rodan should have when we're talking about a fiery pterodactyl or not pterodactyl, whatever. I just feel like on the final product, it definitely is missed, whether you hit the light on point or just a bit off center. And I do think it is a little bit difficult for the collector to say, hey, I'm going to buy UV lights just for this one effect. However, if you are looking to get this figure, then you can maybe get some other cool stuff along with it, like over at BBTS as well. They do have some neat shirts, like particularly Godzilla Ghost X Ghost shirts. And I do have the Gigan Bleed one and the Shin Godzilla ones. Just as a note, these are actually really nice shirts. You do have to follow the directions and let them air dry. You don't put them in the dryer. These are really comfortable. I'm actually wearing the Shin Godzilla one at the time of recording. And these actually light up really cool under UV lights. So if you're thinking maybe you want to spend the $10 or so for UV flashlights like I have, I'll link some in the description. You know, you're going to pick up Hiya figures at BBTS, get a couple shirts, have yourself a rave at home. Anyway, now let's take a look at Rodan under normal lights. And Rodan himself is pretty cool. I will say it is a bit more of a muted coloration compared to the normal Rodan figure. Now, the Flameborn Rodan obviously is going to have the idea of, rebirth in the name, I suppose. That's what I think about it. And when it comes to the standard coloration of Rodan here, when you don't have the UV lights on, I have to say that it definitely seems like Rodan has finally cooled off, almost as if the antithesis of Flame and Born. I hope that makes sense. I do think that this is rather unique compared to the standard release of Rodan that they did originally, wherein that one definitely does have the bright flaming wings, where this one seems a bit more pulled back. It doesn't seem full force, but I will say some of the paint issues that folks had with the original release and technically the reissue that they did for that Rodan are addressed with, even though there's a little bit there, just a little bit of paint on the beak, that's pretty much gone, and the eyes are more well defined, and even though they are small, they are on point and they do look nice, so no real issues there. Overall, I think that when we turn the lights off, Rodan does in fact get a little bit less dangerous, but Rodan still does look good. Of course, though, you are going to want to know a bit more about how he looks side by side with the original, but we're going to do a quick size comparison so you can see how big Rodan is compared to some of your other figures if you need a reminder. But if you do have the original Rodan, or you had him at some point, again, this is going to be a repaint. So here's going to be the comparison, which will break or sell a lot of folks, because I'll talk about the UV gimmick again in a second. It is a gimmick. Here is what the two will look like side by side. Personally, I like the look of the original Rodan more. It is much more accurate to what we think about Rodan from King of the Monsters, from the most iconic scenes from the movie, and it just fits with the Monsterverse Rodan more, whereas this one just kind of seems like Rodan's cooled off a little bit, and there's not a whole lot of fire and flames going on. So buy now, skip, or wait for a deal. Here is where we are at a bit of a conundrum. When it comes to the Hiya Godzilla figures collectively, we'll just go ahead and say that, I would say that this is a great option for those who are looking for a Monsterverse Rodan and who are in the market for one, right? So the articulation, as we know, is pretty rock solid, especially with the minor material changes made for the figure, like they did with the translucent Godzilla. Okay, so that is good. However, when it comes to the support stand, it really isn't here or there. It's just, included. It's not all that great. It's not all that bad. And when it comes to the UV effect, I honestly think it's pretty weak, despite it being a gimmick, because it's going to be one of those situations where if you have a UV light, I mean, yeah, great, you win. But if you don't, you got to spend like $10 to get flashlights in order to get this effect going, like I had to do. And of course, link will be there for you in the description. So I think keeping those aside, here's basically the flow chart that you have. If you don't have a Hiya Rodan yet, and the original release is not accessible to you, well, then by default, you're going to be getting this one. If you have the original Rodan release and you were kind of on the fence, from me, you're going to be paying price plus whatever the cost of flashlights are going to be to get the UV effect. And if that turns you off, there's no reason to pick it up. If you're a completionist, you already own it. So let me know in the comments why you'd be watching a review, please. I'm not being sarcastic. I really want to know. Flameborn Rodan, it's a cool figure, neat gimmick, but realistically speaking, does it deliver? I'll let that be your decision.